Hey everybody, it's Joe from greenlightsound.com, and in today's episode we've got a shootout between 5 different variations of API EQ plugins, all based roughly upon the 550A equalizer. Some are exact models of the 550A, some have some tweaks based upon the 550A, but they're all API style equalizers. One of the unique characteristics of the API EQ is that it has what they call proportional Q, meaning when you boost or cut at extreme amounts, it tightens up or narrows the bandwidth or Q setting, and that's all variable depending on how much you're boosting or cutting. You have no control over that Q, but it's done automatically. It gets narrower the more extreme the setting is. 3 of these plugins are almost exact copies of a 550A. First, we've got the Waves over here. We've got the UAD, Universal Audio 550A, and down at the bottom, though it doesn't look like it because of copyright reasons, it's got the same exact controls, the IK Multimedia T-Rax EQ PA. These two, the Axis EQ from Sly-Fi Digital and Slate Digital's FGA, are 550A based, but have a few little extra tweaks in them. There's an extra mid-band in the Slate Digital version, and the Sly-Fi Digital version has some extra controls between A, which is the vintage version, B, a modern version, and the UBK version here is completely sweepable between all these different frequency bands, so they're not fixed anymore. But still, again, all based on the API 550A. So the first thing I'd like to do is hear a guitar part, and API EQs they really excel on guitar parts. I'd like to hear a guitar part with no EQ engaged at all. It's a guitar solo. Here is the raw, un-EQ'd guitar part. Now, normally I wouldn't EQ in solo. You'd have the rest of the context of the mix going on at the same time. But just for an example, today we'll hear this part soloed up as we try these EQs out. In the context of the mix, I went with a couple of settings here. The blue knob is the actual frequency you're choosing, and the gray knob here is the amount you're boosting or cutting. So it's set to 5K, and I have a 6 dB boost at 5K. I'm pulling out 2 dB at 1.5K, and I'm pulling out 2 dB at 300 hertz. One of the important things to remember is not all of these plugins instantiate with the same exact settings. For example, the Waves version doesn't have the high frequency as a bell. It has the high frequency set as a shelf at first, which can sound pretty harsh if you're boosting 6 dB at 5K. So you want to watch out for that and make sure you choose the right setting, either bell or shelf. The low frequency I did want to keep as a shelf for that big cut down around 300. Here it is with the EQ engaged now. Again, without. And I flipped it on there at the very end. You can hear how much of that high end you get in there. You cut a little bit of that mud out. You get a little bit of that kind of graininess in the upper mid-range from the 1.5K, cutting just 2 dB, but open up that top end a lot to get a nice, clear sound. If I do the same exact settings on the UAD plugin, here's what it sounds like. Bypass that one. We'll try the exact same thing with the Axis EQ plugin. Sly-Fi Digital, Cush Audio. Here it is. Next up, we have Slate Digital's FGA within the virtual mix rack. And finally, IK Multimedia T-Rax 5 EQ PA. And one last time for the raw signal. tell how that raw signal would get buried in a mix if it wasn't bright enough, but these APIs really open up that top end nicely. So the next thing I want you to do is hear all these kind of back to back. I created a loop up here that includes most of the guitar solo. We're going to start with the Waves version. I'll engage that one, and every time it goes through the loop, I'll put the next version on. Again, it's Waves, UAD, Sly-Fi, Slate Digital, and IK Multimedia, starting with Waves. So maybe you heard some differences, maybe you didn't. You're not to be blamed if you didn't. I'll show you why. I'm going to pop over here to our analyzer plugin here, where we have a look at the EQ curves from all of these 5 plugins in the same order they were on this list up here. We've got our Waves as the green plot. You almost can't see that Waves. It starts right here, flattens out, and pulls right into this section. What you're going to notice for most of these EQs is they follow almost the identical curve up here. So that's why they sound very similar. The UAD and the Waves are so similar that you can't distinguish the two apart from each other than in the low end, where the UAD has this kind of weird peak here around 5 hertz, which you'd never hear anyway. It's below what most speakers can reproduce and below human hearing. But once you get past that point, they're almost identical curves. The Sly-Fi is the weirdest one. That's that green one that starts up here. Scoops down, little bump up here, not quite as wide of a bell here, a little bit more narrow in that 5K boost area. My guess is because the Sly-Fi is not trying to be an exact emulation, just kind of inspired by the API EQ, and maybe that's why it's not exactly the same. The IK Multimedia, it says yellow here, it's actually this pink one here, has a giant boost in that low end, right past 20 hertz, which definitely gets into our hearing range here. Not sure where that comes from, but after that, follows nearly the same curve, though doesn't extend quite as high on that Q at the top end. The Slate Digital version, you notice how these all have a really sharp cutoff just past 20K? The Slate doesn't. It extends past that part, which why a lot of people think the Slate has a really nice top end boost. That's probably why. You're getting some of that air up there without the sharp cutoff. But they're all very, very similar. So you could be forgiven if you can't tell the difference between all of them. So if the EQ plots are almost exactly the same, with the exception of the axis EQ, what difference are we hearing? Well, it might be from the analog modeled saturation that's going on with each plugin. So there they are, 5 different API 550A style EQ plugins for your comparison. Let me know down in the comment section below which one you preferred, if you can tell the difference between them, if you like one better than the other. Be an interesting discussion to have to hear what you preferred in the sound of these API EQs on guitar. If you have any other questions or comments, let me know down below as well. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't done it already so we can keep you in the loop with new videos, and I'll see you in the next one.